Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri, with our beloved Alok. We continue in Book 4, the Book of Birth and Quest, Canto 2, The Growth of the Flame, and we are on page 365, just at the break by the bottom.
So, as we are being revealed, different kinds of beings responding to Savitri, to the divinity in her, and we see this in earth that some open to the divine, some respond with resistance, some are even afraid of the divine presence. And I was reading, what Mother has spoken about it. She says, some revolt.
Yes.
And are afraid. Why? Because the divine presence means they have to change. So, everybody likes to live within their limits. So, all are not ready for accepting and acknowledging the divine in life. That's why you see certain philosophies where divine is not there, find an easy acceptance in human beings. And one reason is because there is no pressure to change. So that's what I was just sharing in the previous class, that while strange, I'm talking of India, about universities in India, that Freudian psychology is taught but not Vedantic psychology, which is a strange paradox.
Yes.
I mean, you teach Freudian psychology, but you also teach Vedantic psychology. Because Vedantic psychology is a cry for change. It's an exploration into portions of being which are hidden. But Freudian psychology is very easy. Man is filth, he is mud, he is an animal. So it's very good. You don't need anything. So we read, all kinds of beings. But since in everybody there is some soul essence, so even when there is a revolt, there is still some kind of a drawing, a wonder and revolt. So that's what we read previously. And now we read further.
I've seen also in physical education.
Yes.
Your mother put such emphasis on it, and so many people said, no, we want to do meditation.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
No care for the body, no concern for the body.
There is another interesting thing that, it's known, well known in all spiritual paths, that there is a difference between being physically near the master and being inwardly close to the divine. It is a well-known difference. There is a difference between being or living in an institution and practicing the path. There is a difference between the two. And, all this, there is a difference between talking about the path and walking the path. It's well known in all circles, in all spiritual circles. So we have to be careful that we don't take it for granted that just because we are physically have an access to samadhi, and because we are fortunate to be able to come to ashram and read the books and maybe even talk about it, it automatically translates into inner nearness. It is something which one has to practice. That is the whole path of yoga.
I would also like to say that any of you who are in the educational system in India, we see that so many saints, yogis are honored. Very rarely we see Sri Aurobindo having a place in universities.
That of course.
Very rarely.
And even when it is there, now they have some universities which have a seat on Sri Aurobindo. They reduce it into just, PhD. Now PhD is, yoga is never learnt in a classroom like that. Yoga is something to be lived. It is always a one-to-one instruction. Yoga is like that. It's never a... But mid this world, these hearts that answered her call, none could stand up her equal and her mate. So there is also a difference between being a devotee and a disciple. Mother speaks of that. She says, as far as protection is concerned, you can have it anywhere. You can pray to divine, and the whole history of spiritual and religious evolution is witness to the fact that whenever man has sincerely sought the divine help, he has it. And there are people who have that kind of relation with the divine. But it's quite another to actually undertake the journey. So this answering to the call means that In vain she stooped to equal them with her heights. Too pure that air was for small souls to breathe. So she is the one who comes close to us. But even that man finds difficult because he finds even that like a pressure. These comrade selves to raise to her own wide breaths, her heart desired and fill with her own power. So, what the mother wants to give us is a diviner life, a diviner power, a diviner force. That a diviner force might enter life, a breath of Godhead great in human time. But what we want from the divine is not the transforming force, but the force that helps us to perpetuate a life in ignorance and to continue to give us those very things which are going to enslave us further and further. But what she wants to give is the divine force that can transform us. This is the difference. Although she leaned down to their littleness, covering their lives with her strong, passionate hands, and knew by sympathy their needs and wants, and dived in the shallow wave depths of their lives, and met and shared their heartbeats of grief and joy, and bent to heal their sorrow and their pride, lavishing the might that was hers on her lone peak, to lift to it their aspirations cry. She leaned down. There is a very interesting story, so many stories, so many people have experienced here. In fact, someone told that, because she came to us with so much of humanness that sometimes we couldn't take that step to see the divine behind the human. So one of the stories is when a child who was 7, his father asked the mother, divine mother, that I want to gift a cycle. So mother said, okay, on his birthday, so from the mother or through the mother, the cycle goes, father has gifted. 5 years pass. Suddenly on 12th birthday of the child, the mother calls him and says, I have something to give you. I have given you a cycle 5 years back. Now you must have outgrown the cycle. And I want to give you this new cycle which will fit into you. Now this was not told by the father. Now look at the divine mother remembering and taking care of these small little things. To what extent she could come. Of course, the child is Vijay Bhai, we all know, and father is Navjhaji. I mean, how she could come to, and countless stories people recount. But at the same time, there is something we must remember that I'll just read. And though she drew their souls into her vast, and surrounded with the silence of her deeps, and held as the great mother holds her own, only her earthly surface bore their charge, and mixed its fire with their mortality, her greater self-lived soul, unclaimed within. So we should be very careful of, sometimes idolizing those who were very close to, physically close. I am sharing a very personal experience regarding this. So when I had come, so obviously I think like almost all of us, I was just looking for somebody who had darshan of Sri Aurobindo. For me it was like I would fall at the feet of the person, and because you feel like that, it's a psychic impulse that you were not fortunate enough to have a darshan, but somebody who had a darshan, by default you want to. So mother's ways, that very evening my wish was fulfilled. I had mentioned it to someone, and I was staying in international guest house, and a word came through. You remember you wanted to see somebody who had darshan of Sri Aurobindo. There is someone. I rushed, leaving behind everything. And this lady told me that, can you leave me to my house? I thought, what better service can I ever do in life? So I started walking with her, and I wanted to know, what was the darshan of Mother Sri Aurobindo. So the moment I would broach that subject, she was so oblivious to it. She said, I'm glad you are leaving me because, now I have this problem, that problem. She told me everything from the problem of gas cylinder and everything except the darshan. By the time I reached, I was like, Lord, darshan has to be your own and has to be within. I mean, there are people who have beautifully grown, but still, even the best, the highest, we should not think that, we should not allow anyone to come between our direct relation with the Divine Mother. And it's there in the Mother itself. They do not allow. And it's not necessary. Her earthly surface bore their charge. Even those who rose to great heights, it was just a little bit of her fire was enough to uplift them. But that's the divinity, power of divinity.
I want to go back a moment from your previous statement, and I can share a personal experience with Mother. In those days, she was seeing thousands of people a week. And I wrote a letter to her, and she answered that letter by writing in between the spaces all answers to all my questions. Some weeks passed, and she asked to see me again. And I went to her, and exactly point by point that was in the letter, she expanded on all of those things. After seeing so many thousands of people.
Yeah, amazing. Unbelievable, actually. I mean, I'm saying unbelievable from a human point of view, something which is seemingly impossible. Mm-hmm. And yet, that's how she has been. So many stories, and I have heard about how she would deal with each one, and she would remember.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Champaklalji asked Mother. Somebody had this prayer to Mother. Mother, may I never forget you. So Champaklalji said, what kind of weird fellow this is? How can you forget Mother and Sri Aurobindo? I can understand that Mother and Sri Aurobindo may forget you because, they are meeting thousands and thousands of people. It's understandable if they forget. How can you forget Mother and Sri Aurobindo? What kind of prayer is this? Then he writes, much later I understood that what he prayed for was right. Mother and Sri Aurobindo never forget. She even says, someone whom she has seen even for a moment, even those who have turned hostile and gone away, revolted and gone away, she holds herself responsible for them. This is the kind of love she brought. Oftener in dumb nature's stir and peace, a nearness she could feel serenely won. The force in her drew earth's subhuman broods. There is an actual experience of Mother in Paris when she was 15, and suddenly all the animals were drawn to her. And so many stories, some of them we have already shared, of her communication with plants, with animals. Plants would tell her, now vegetables, now I am ready, now I am not ready.
Pick me.
Pick me. The flowers would reveal their essence. The tree would come and tell her that, the axe has been put into my trunk. So, subhuman broods. At one place she says the animal and plant life will be the first to respond. And this now I am personally convinced, looking at all the dogs around the ashram, that, animals will be the first to respond. Human beings come much later, and there is a reason she will tell us.
She actually wrote to me about the plants and said their whole life is an aspiration for light.
Yes.
And they'll be amongst the first to respond.
Yes, it's there in her conversation. Plants and animals will be among the first one. Sri Aurobindo even goes on to say in conversations that why do you think that human beings are superior? And then he gives the example of all the creatures of a tigress. He says that there was a tigress who was being taken from the zoo to another zoo or another in the wilds. And when the tigress was leaving, she had the trainer who was feeding and everything. The look on the tigress face of that love, that attachment, that compassion, she said, seldom you find it in human beings.
Yes.
And she had it. And she said it is the presence of the psychic in the vital that has this kind of a love where, you feel this kind of emotion. She says, human beings turned too selfish. And he's giving of all the creatures the example of a tigress, which is fierce creature, not of a dog or a cat. And of course, dog and cat, he has given so many examples. The force in her drew earth's subhuman broods, and to her spirit's large and free delight, she joined the ardent hued, magnificent lives of animal and bird and flower and tree. Actually, animals, so many stories, come to the mind. One of them is Ojas. You know who was Ojas? Ojas was the bullock. And when the caretaker was hitting the bullock, Sri Aurobindo said that the bullock was more receptive than the man. He was giving message to the man to stop it, but man wouldn't receive. But bullock received the Lord's touch and went through it with a sense of ease. So he says the bullock is more receptive than the man. Tell him. Then he called for the man. Tell him not to do like this. And another was Bodhu, the donkey.
Yes.
He would not do any work but jump around in the ashram. And when this was reported to Sri Aurobindo that he only runs around, jumps around, but if you give some work, he will stand still as if he is not capable of doing anything. Sri Aurobindo remarked, typical sadhak. So you can imagine, typical sadhak. I will sit in meditation, don't give me work. So, how these animals, they responded, and even he responded in the race and came first. He was not running in the race. I asked Richard, tell me that story, because it was his donkey. So he would stand, he would not start. Every donkey has started the race, but he is standing. So ultimately they had to invoke the mother. And when they invoked the mother, suddenly he ran. And ran like anything and came first. What a receptivity, that animals and plants have.
And the crow that mother used to feed.
Yes, and one day, every day he would take from mother. Name was Blackie. And one day when mother couldn't go, Champaklalji went, he didn't take.
He wouldn't take the food.
I want mother to come and give me. Animals had this kind of, and of course the tree coming to her that they have decided to cut me. This story once I was telling when they were cutting some trees left and right and center. I said, you know that story? We know all the stories. So that's the end of the story. I just come and I felt very enthusiastic. So I said, we are cutting like this. We should pray at least something. If the contractor wants, cut it. It's a pure practical exigency. But look what she has taught us to,
And with a machete, no less.
Yeah. So, they answered to her with the simple heart, and now comes the explanation. In man, a dim disturbing somewhat lives. It knows, but turns away from divine light, preferring the dark ignorance of the fall. This is the problem of man, because he thinks he is too intelligent. And he knows everything. So he doesn't really need the divine except to fulfill his desires. So things like loyalty, fidelity, mothers, there is a whole 5 pictures of, I think it is that dog Goldie, or maybe the dog, maybe one of some other one, where she writes all the qualities that we can learn from the dog. Faithful, loyalty, fidelity, and things like that, that we can learn from the dog. And they are psychic in their nature. Among the many who came drawn to her, nowhere she found her partner of high tasks, the comrade of her soul, her other self, who was made with her like God and nature, one. Remarkable. So who are the souls marked out, whom she is choosing? Not those who want to abandon nature or, give all kinds of pida and pain and suffering to nature and focus only on otherworldliness. Neither those who are completely indulgent in nature, completely forgetful of the divinity within. So in Synthesis, there is a very remarkable passage where he says about people who mistake sacrifice to mean self-denial and self-immolation. He says sacrifice does not mean that. He says the Krishna within has to be fostered and cherished. But what we have to excise are the band of spirits enemies whose names are lust and greed and anger. They have to be exercised and not the movement of nature itself. The movement of nature is very beautiful and it can be beautiful. So, like God and nature, one. Some near approached, were touched, caught fire, then failed. This is one of the letters of Sri Aurobindo where he was asked why some people came and they went away. Does it mean that they were not drawn by anything genuine? He says, no, the initial turning may be genuine, but there may be a strong ambition, especially in Asuric natures. He uses that example. And they may turn away because after some time these things are uncovered and they come up. He speaks about dangers and difficulties of yoga. The mother speaks about it. She says sometimes ambition may get uncovered and can take the better of you, and people have gone in, pursuit of high laurels and degrees in worldly life, turned away. Too great was her demand, too pure her force, thus lighting earth around her like a sun, yet in her inmost sky an orb aloof, a distance severed her from those most close, puissant, apart her soul as the gods live. So, in the initial years, even here, mother would hardly come out. She used to stay in her room. And people would ask, they used to see her with some awe. And she would be doing like everybody else, cleaning the floor, sitting on the floor before Sri Aurobindo. She taught people how to sit before the master. And once Amrita asked Sri Aurobindo that, isn't Meera Devi a great yogi? Sri Aurobindo said, yes, indeed, she is very great. But she doesn't meet us, doesn't give us meditation. And then Sri Aurobindo says that, well, one day impelled by the divine love, she will come out. And that indeed will be a great day. Otherwise, she was not coming out. And how she used to conceal herself, Amrita reveals. He requested her that please give me some lessons. He said, okay, we will read together. I think the book they read was either Yoga and its Objects or Yogic Sadhana, one of the books. So he describes what a fool I was. Mother would sit on one chair, I would sit next to her and we would read. As if it's a normal swadhyaya going on. And that's how she was. She is, before the Lord, she would teach us how to, sit on the floor. But for herself, she would come down and mix and mingle. And that was the reason why she was falling ill. And Sri Aurobindo says that because she would identify with the consciousness of the sadhaks. Because that was the only way. So she would jump and identify. And that's why she fell seriously ill before the formation of the ashram. Before 1926. And then many things had to change. So she started coming out. The moment she came out, she started taking everybody's burden. So,
I'll read.
Yes, please.
As yet unlinked with the broad human scene, in a small circle of young, eager hearts, her being's early school and closed domain. Apprentice in the business of earth life, she schooled her heavenly strain to bear its touch, content in her little garden of the gods, as blooms a flower in an unvisited place.
As yet unlinked with the broad human scene, this now, growth of the flame when she is in adolescent. Nobody knows what is going on. Later on she describes between the age of 9 and 10, 9 to 11, and in the agenda she even speaks about even as early as 7 years when she would experience these gods, these beings, and she was meeting them in her. This was her personal private life, but nobody knew. As far as schooling, she had no interest. So one day her brother told her, he was reading something and mother asked, what are you reading? So he said, I am reading this. So he said, tell me about it. He said, why? Why can't you read? So mother took it as a challenge because till then she had not started reading. She must be around 8 or 9. Then she picked up. Within 3 days, she learnt everything and started reading fluently. So that's why later on when people would go to her and, tell her, oh, this child doesn't study, doesn't read, and she would tell the teacher or the parents, oh, why are you bothered about it? Leave the child free. Let the child grow in its own way. And we have many classic examples like that.
Yes.
Because more important is the real education which comes from within. See, this classroom education is only a purely mentalized thing. Like mind has built institutions around everything. And thereby it has cut us from the great current of life, which helps us to grow organically. After all, at the end of the day, what kind of knowledge we really need? Not the abstruse physics, chemistry. We need something to live and grow. And we don't get that because the real experience of life, the contact, so children grow up, they have degrees, but they don't know how to handle their own feelings. So, she was being schooled in nature, that's what, and how she learned so many things. Later on, she also tells, how see how a divine being looks at things. So Satprem once asked her, again, very mentalized way of looking, that, locusts come and they spoil the garden. He talking about human beings who spoil the earth. So what should be done? He says, why are you wanting to do something? No, but they destroy. He says, who told you? You should see how gardens grow in the wild. So he says, what does it mean? Then she gives example of a garden which was hidden to sight because of a boundary wall. And one day she opened and went inside. It was uncared for by anyone. And she says that it was so beautiful. It was all in the wild. And I think many of us remember our childhood. I remember, going for getting flowers for puja for my parents, and also quietly stealing mangoes and picking them up. And they were not cared for gardens. They just came up randomly. And those paths made something, it was very beautiful. You would have a small little path because of human beings passing through. And it has its own joy and charm. But human beings will put it into fixed shape and fix this. Because this is how the mind operates. But there is a schooling that goes on in nature. If we open the child, he will learn those things. So that's how she was schooled. She schooled her heavenly strain to bear its touch, content in her little garden of the gods, as blooms a flower in an unvisited place. Earth nursed, unconscious still, the inhabiting flame. This earth, of course, is the physical body and the material nature. Yet something deeply stirred and dimly knew. There was a movement and a passionate call, a rainbow dream, a hope of golden change. Some secret wing of expectation beat, a growing sense of something new and rare and beautiful stole across the heart of time. This dream, as a 15-year-old, I think she wrote this beautiful story. I think many people may not have read it, but please read it. A Sapphire Tale. Read this story? It's in words of long ago. It's the story of a girl who is in an island and dreaming of a man who would come. But it may sound at one look about any other story. But it's a story which is beautiful from beginning till end. That is the beauty of the story. And later on she tells children, why do you want to bring in a story, something which must oppose? And we can write a story which is beautiful from beginning to end. So, it's a beautiful story. I myself read it later thinking, story is unimportant, let's first read all the things. But then all the stories, virtues, a Sapphire Tale, leader, wonderful stories, Even the leader is based on a real incidence.
And I think the children should continue to dream.
Yes.
All of you should dream. And you can tell your dreams to your family. You can share them, but never stop dreaming.
Yes. Even elderly, I tell them that, if nothing is there, dream of the yet future which is to be born. Why not? We shape everything, so why not we keep dreaming of beautiful things and imagine beautiful things. Then a faint whisper of her touched the soul, breathed like a hidden need the soul divines. The eye of the great world discovered her, and wonder lifted up its bardic voice. Now you see, even Sri Aurobindo describes how humanity discovered, and we know at least some of the stories, some of the names he has said from famous painters. Was it Raphael and some of those famous ones who appreciated her, to the priest in Fao, to Tagore and Abdul Baha. Suddenly, people, what they must have felt. Now we know she is the mother. But they felt something about her. And the world discovered her. And then comes this wonderful line. Exalted, a key to a light still kept in being's cave. The sunward of an ancient mystery sense, her name ran murmuring on the lips of men. People must be saying, oh, do you know? Have you met her? There is something so special about her. So her name ran murmuring on the lips of men. Mother would not speak of all these stories, but just a few we know. Beings who were great in their own right. I mean, Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha wanted her to take charge of a movement. It's not an ordinary thing. Look at it, the Baha'i sect now. And Tagore wanted her to come and join him in his work. All these, two things we know for sure because she has documented that. And many others who would have felt meeting her that there is something so special about her. And this line I love, her name ran murmuring on the lips of men. You see, murmuring. Have you known? Do you know her? Have you heard of her? It's not through advertisement that 108 बार she Shrimati aa rahi hain. You don't need. Son is son. That's why when people wanted, she said, we don't believe in propaganda. When the sun comes out, it comes out. Sun doesn't have to announce and declare itself, I am Mr. Sun. It is there because it is, by its light it is known.
I think we should read these lines over and over again.
Yes.
Because when Sri Aurobindo speaks of Mother here, he speaks with such beauty.
Yes.
And wonder lifted up its bardic voice. Or as you say, her name ran murmuring on the lips of men, exalted and sweet like an inspired verse, struck from the epic lyre of rumor's winds, or sung like a chanted thought by the poet Fame.
Even this name, he is speaking about mother's name. There is a very interesting conversation where I think it is Nagin Doshi correspondence where he says, I was listening to Meera's bhajans and I felt such a descent of mother's force. How could it be possible? He said, because just the fact of the name Meera, because of the mother's name being there, because he says, Meera kahe. So the fact of mother's name being there can induce this experience. So the power of a name, and how her name has ensured. Many people don't know perhaps that they make a lot of fuss about her name being M-I-R-R-A. Sri Aurobindo has also spelt it as M-I-R-A. It is there in his letters, documented. So both names are valid. And he used to call her Meera Devi. At least two persons used to call her Meera Devi. One is Sri Aurobindo and second was Hardan Bhakshi. Bhakshi, I pardon. He was a military man. I beg your pardon. Old man is gone. But he was the one who used to announce, at night when people are waiting for mother to come. So it is 11:30. So they are sitting in ashram courtyard. How much can you talk or wait? They fall asleep. So it was Hardhan's job to see when she is coming. When she is coming, he would announce on a bhopu kind of thing. Mother is coming, or Meera Devi is coming, Meera Devi is coming. Now everybody gets up, mother is coming. Yes, so many stories about him.
Once I spoke with my guide, Arvind Basu, and I told him that I was calling Mother I would mostly say mother, or sometimes ma, and he said, you can also call her Mira. It's very, very important.
Any which way. See the power of the name. But like a sacred symbols was that cult. How beautiful. Admired, unsought, intangible to the grasp. See, that's how we deal with divinity. We admire, but we don't seek to be like that. And we don't understand. And that's the tragedy of, earth nature. Her beauty and flaming strength were seen afar, like lightning playing with the fallen day, a glory unapproachably divine. No equal heart came close to join her heart. No transient earthly love assailed her calm. No hero passion had the strength to seize. No eyes demanded her replying eyes. Any idea how many disciples were there of Sri Aurobindo till 1950? It was around 200. Can we imagine? We talk about mass movement. It's Sri Aurobindo who doesn't want it. Just about 200. If you look at it, he could have easily commanded the whole earth, with all that, but he didn't want that. That's why he told Mother. Like a sacred symbol was that cult. It was so sacred that there was a time when Mother and Sri Aurobindo's photographs had to be put behind under a kind of a curtain. So people who were given the photographs, they were told not to put it publicly in front of everyone. So in their home, supposing there was a disciple but family members were not seekers. So the photograph will be there and the person would put a small little cloth over it. And there are many interesting stories like that because they didn't want till the supramental manifestation. After that we see Sri Aurobindo Society and Auroville and the whole thing because the work was done, the fundamental work. But before that, they didn't want that, their name should be known and publicized or made popular or, because propaganda, then forces come. No eyes demanded her replying eyes. A power within her awed the imperfect flesh, the self-protecting genius in our clay, divined the goddess in the woman's shape. So, men who were identified with physical nature, they too felt something they felt, but there's this hardness in the flesh which protects you even against the divine. And draw back from a touch beyond its kind, the earth nature bound in sense life's narrow meek. So though they felt something, human beings who are entrenched in the flesh, yet they won't come too near. They would see from afar and admire from afar.
I'll complete it.
Yes, please.
The hearts of men are amorous of clay kin, and bear not spirits lone and high, who bring fire intimations from the deathless plains, too vast for souls not born to mate with heaven. Whoever is too great must lonely live. Adored, he walks in mighty solitude. Vain is his labor to create his kind. His only comrade is the strength within. Thus was it for a while with Savitri.
So,
all worshipped marvelingly, none dared to claim. Her mind sat high, pouring its golden beams. Her heart was a crowded temple of delight, a single lamp lit in perfection's house, a bright, pure image in a priestless shrine. Midst those encircling lives, her spirit dwelt, apart in herself, until her hour of fate.
So this is very beautiful and significant. The hearts of men are amorous of clay kin. So when people approach God, they want the standard stock things, and that is why people find difficult to understand Mother and Sri Aurobindo, because they are not saying the standard stock things that get up in the morning, touch your parents' feet, say a prayer or a mantra. None of that. On the contrary, Mother laughs. She says, all the habits are breaking. Now, most people find it very difficult. That ascetic things, she says, have no significance from the spiritual point of view. In fact, she says they are dangerous people. She says things like you can practice a discipline like the Hatha Yoga and Raj Yoga, but not even enter the spiritual life. The former arrives at body control and the later at mind control. Now, when you say such things, they are too high and great for human littleness. So it's very difficult, and we are amorous of clay-kin, somebody who can talk and speak like us, our language. And bear not spirits lone and high, who bring fire intimations from the deathless plains, too vast for souls not born to mate with heaven. Whoever is too great must lonely live. Reverse is not true, that whoever is living lonely is too great. Besides, this loneliness is an inner loneliness. You can be lonely in a crowd. That's precisely what Sri Aurobindo says, that one can be in multitudes while being alone, because you are in your mind world in all kinds of images. Whereas you can be lonely in a crowd. This loneliness is about that nobody is there who can share with you your life, because it is too high, too vast, too profound. Otherwise, outwardly we see the Divine Mother, she was married, Sri Aurobindo got married. So it's not about the outer life, it's about the inner loneliness where there is nothing which can share the rich and profound existence. I mean, how could Sri Aurobindo reveal what he is going through, or the mother, what she is experiencing? And of course, her husband with whom she came, he had a hint that she is Divine Mother. But this became a problem for him, because he would fight that you make me God because you are Divine Mother. So you can do it, but she won't, because she has not come to follow the normal pattern. Whoever is too great must lonely live. Adored he walks in mighty solitude. Vain is his labor to create his kind. His only comrade is the strength within. So she wants that people should become, close to her. Friendship with the divine. At one place she says, friendship with the divine is a very difficult thing, because then he will be very unsparing to you. As long as from far devotee seeking some help is okay. But friendship with the divine, if he gives you, he will be thorough, like Arjuna. Shri Krishna gave his friendship to Arjuna, but look what he had to undergo all his life. Thus was it for a while with Savitri. All worshipped marvelingly, none dared to claim. Here claim is of course in the sense to come near her, to share, to be close to her. Her mind sat high, pouring its golden beams. Her heart was a crowded temple of delight. A single lamp lit in perfection's house. A bright, pure image in a priestless shrine. Midst those encircling lives her spirit dwelt, apart in herself, until her hour of fate. So you see, some of these lines have very cryptic sense. Often in Savitri we meet. One of them is crowded temple of delight. So there is a delight of oneness that yogis experience, withdrawing from the world. But there is a delight of multiplicity, where you carry multitudes, you carry the whole creation, you carry the world within, and you suffuse delight into everything, and everything is a equal delight. So it's a crowded temple of delight. Another very cryptic line is a bright, pure image in a priestless shrine. So what is this priest which is missing in this shrine? You see, the role of the priest is till you come in contact with the deity. That is what the priest is meant to do. But when the divine has awakened in you fully, You don't need the priest. You are freed from the priest. In ordinary human beings, it is the mind which is the priest, which is an ignorant priest. Mana Sharir Prana Neta. That's how it is described. The true priest is the psychic being. Agnir Hotaram. But here it's priestless because you don't need. There is a direct contact with the divine when one engaged with her. So this
intermediary.
Yes, no intermediary. So it's very interesting. Many places in Savitri, suddenly there will be a cryptic line which goes unnoticed in the flow. But when you dwell upon it, it's something marvelous, like crowded temple of delight. I love this line. It's not delight of oneness only, but delight of multiplicity. So I think we'll stop here and meet tomorrow, start a new canto.